Imagine someone you love, your mom, your gran, your neighbor who can barely remember what day it is, placed under the care of a professional. Someone trained, certified, trusted by the state to protect them. And then imagine that same person, slowly, quietly, over the course of months, dips into your loved one's bank account. Again. And again. And again. Not a stranger breaking in through a window. Not a scammer calling from overseas. Someone who was supposed to be their protector. Now here's the part that will keep you up at night. This doesn't just happen in crime dramas. It happened. It was documented. It was proven. And the system designed to catch it almost didn't. What does this case reveal about the people we trust with the most vulnerable among us? And more importantly, what does it reveal about human nature itself? Stay with me. Because what you're about to hear is not just a story about misconduct. It's a masterclass in how ordinary people, under ordinary pressure, can convince themselves that what they're doing is justified. If you've ever felt genuinely disturbed by what people in positions of authority can get away with, if you care about justice, about protecting the vulnerable, about understanding why people cross moral lines, then you need to subscribe to this channel right now. I spend hours every week breaking down real cases like this one because I believe understanding human behavior isn't optional anymore. It's survival. Hit subscribe. It costs you nothing, and it might just change everything. In 2020 and 2021, a formal fitness to practice hearing took place before Social Work England, the professional regulator for social workers in that country. The social worker at the center of it was Safi. She wasn't a career criminal. She wasn't a villain in a black cape. She was a newly qualified social worker, employed by the Leicestershire Council, working with elderly adults aged 65 and above. People with memory problems. People who couldn't always manage their own finances. People who, by definition, needed someone to look after them. What unfolded over 2016 into 2017 became one of the most instructive case studies in professional betrayal, psychological rationalization, and the slow erosion of ethical boundaries that I have ever come across. By the end of this video, you are going to understand 5 things. First, how people in positions of trust justify crossing lines they would never have imagined crossing. Second, the psychological mechanics of rationalization and why good intentions can be weaponized. Third, why lack of oversight isn't just a management failure, it's an invitation. Fourth, how dishonesty compounds and how the first small lie makes the second one inevitable. And fifth, what this tells us about the human capacity for self-deception. If you leave before the end, you'll miss the most uncomfortable truth of all. Don't say I didn't warn you. Here's something most people don't want to admit. We like to believe that people who do terrible things are fundamentally different from us. We want the line between good people and bad people to be thick, bright, and obvious, because if it's not, if that line is thin and blurry and crossed gradually, then that means we have to pay attention to ourselves. And that's uncomfortable. Think about the last time you were overwhelmed at work. You were juggling too many tasks, your manager was unavailable, nobody was really checking what you were doing, and the pressure was relentless. Most of us, in that state, start cutting corners. Nothing dramatic. Just small things. A shortcut here, a skipped step there. Now imagine that situation, but the stakes are someone else's financial security. Someone who doesn't fully understand what's happening to their own money. Someone who trusts you completely because they have no other option. That's the world Safi was operating in. A newly qualified social worker in her assessed and supported year in employment. An overstretched manager who, by his own admission, couldn't always find documentation from his supervision sessions. A caseload that would have tested an experienced professional, let alone someone just starting out. And 2 service users, referred to only as Service User A and Service User B, who were vulnerable, isolated, and depending on her. Now, I want to be very clear. None of that excuses what happened. But if we dismiss this case as simply, a bad person did bad things, we learn absolutely nothing. And we leave the next vulnerable person completely unprotected. Because the truth is, the road to betrayal is rarely a sudden sharp turn. It's a long, gentle slope. And by the time you realize how far you've walked, turning back feels impossible. Here's the counterintuitive insight that changes how you see everything about this case. The most dangerous betrayals are not committed by people who hate their victims. They're committed by people who believe they're helping them. In her evidence, Safi did not say she was stealing. She said she was supporting the service users. She said she was meeting their needs. She said she was building up a cash reserve for service user A. She framed every single withdrawal as an act of care. And here is where psychology becomes genuinely disturbing, because in the early stages, she may even have believed it. There's a well-documented phenomenon in behavioral psychology called moral licensing. The idea is simple. When we do something we perceive as good, we unconsciously give ourselves permission to do something we otherwise wouldn't. I've been working so hard for this person, I deserve a little flexibility. I'm helping them, so the normal rules shouldn't apply to me. It starts as rationalization. It ends as justification. And the longer it goes unchallenged, the more it becomes, in the person's own mind, simply true. This is not a comforting truth. But it is a necessary one. Let's talk about what actually happened, and why the details matter far more than the headline. Service user A was an elderly woman with concerns about her capacity to manage her finances. From as early as August 2016, there were documented discussions about the need to apply to the Court of Protection, a legal process designed to formally protect people in exactly this situation. Safi was sent the relevant form on September 15, 2016. She didn't submit it until January 16, 2017. That's 4 months. During those 4 months, she accessed service user A's post office account approximately 9 times. She withdrew money, sometimes the maximum amount permitted, on multiple occasions. And she recorded almost none of it. The records she did make were detailed in other respects. She could write thorough, careful case notes when she chose to. But when it came to the cash withdrawals? Nothing. Not the amounts. Not the dates. Not the reasons. Here is your first aha moment. The absence of a record is itself evidence of intention. When someone selectively omits information that would attract scrutiny, while maintaining detailed records of everything else, they are not being careless. They are being deliberate. The panel found exactly this. They concluded that some or all of the failure to record withdrawals was with the intention of disguising misappropriation. Not negligence. Not oversight. Intention. Now ask yourself, when did the line get crossed? When was the first moment this became dishonesty rather than poor practice? I would argue it was the moment she chose not to write it down. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Now here's where this case enters genuinely troubling psychological territory. When the council's investigation began in September 2017, Safi accessed the case records of 5 service users, including service user A and service user B, on multiple occasions between the 19th and the 27th of September. 17 accesses in total, across cases she was no longer professionally responsible for. She admitted it. She said she was trying to find out what she was going to be asked about in an upcoming interview. Think about what that tells us about the human mind under threat. She didn't confess. She didn't come forward. She didn't try to make it right. Her first instinct when the walls started closing in was to gather intelligence. To prepare her story. To understand what they knew before she had to answer for it. This is called anticipatory impression management, and it's one of the clearest signs that someone has already crossed into conscious deception. You don't rehearse for a conversation you're not afraid of. But here's the deeper insight. At some point in this story, Safi stopped being someone who was making questionable decisions and became someone who was actively managing a secret. And once you're managing a secret, every subsequent choice is made in service of protecting it. The investigation found approximately £3,000 of service user A's money was unaccounted for. An envelope bearing her name was not found in the office safe when checked on July 25, 2017. Safi's explanations for what happened to the money was that she had swapped large denomination notes at her house, that she had taken it home for 3 to 4 days, or was it 3 weeks? She couldn't be sure. This was found by the panel to be, in their words, implausible. The panel concluded she had dealt with that £3,000 as if it were, for a period of time, money she was entitled to access. Your second aha moment. The story someone tells under pressure is often the most honest thing about them. Not because it's true, but because the way it changes, the way it shifts and contracts and re-expands between interviews, reveals exactly where the truth is being hidden. This is a good moment to pause and ask you something directly. Have you ever been in a situation where you watched someone in authority cut a corner, or do something that didn't feel right, and said nothing? Maybe because you weren't sure. Maybe because you didn't think it was your place. Maybe because you told yourself it was probably fine. Drop a comment below and let me know. Because what happened in this case was not just one person's failure. It was a systemic failure. And understanding your own role in systems like this as a colleague, a family member, a friend, is one of the most important things you can take from this video. Let's talk about the second service user, because this part of the case reveals something slightly different and equally important. Service user B was also elderly, also financially vulnerable, also at a point where her capacity to manage her own money was in question. Safi accessed her Santander account approximately 17 times between October 2016 and June 2017. She made withdrawals over an extended period, including after she herself had formally assessed this woman as lacking capacity to manage her finances. Let me rephrase that for you. She completed the mental capacity assessment. She wrote down, in her professional capacity, that this woman could not make decisions about her money. And then she continued to withdraw cash from her account. The mental capacity assessment wasn't completed until February 2017, despite concerns being documented from October 2016. The Court of Protection application wasn't progressed until June 2017. For months after the assessment. The panel found these delays amounted to misconduct. But the finding they didn't make is just as revealing. Safi was also accused of deliberately misleading service user B's neighbor and an advocate, giving the impression that the council was managing the service user's finances when it was not. The panel found those particular allegations not proved. They gave her the benefit of the doubt. They accepted that she may genuinely have been describing her own involvement in the case, not making a false representation. And this is your third aha moment. The picture of human behavior that emerges from this case is not black and white. She was not wrong about everything. She was not lying at every moment. She was, as most people are in these situations, a complicated mixture of genuine care, poor judgment, rationalization, and, at some point, deliberate dishonesty. We lose something important when we refuse to hold that complexity. Now let's talk about what the panel ultimately decided, and why it matters far beyond this one case. The Fitness to Practice Committee found misconduct proved in relation to the dishonesty, the inappropriate access to accounts, and the failure to keep proper records. They found her fitness to practice currently impaired on grounds of both public protection and the wider public interest. And they ordered her removal from the register. Not suspension. Not conditions. Removal. Why? Because they concluded that dishonesty involving a vulnerable person's money, combined with attempts to conceal that dishonesty, combined with limited demonstrated insight, created a risk they could not manage with lesser measures. One phrase from the panel's decision has stayed with me. They noted that Safi had expressed regret and remorse, but there was no evidence of significant reflection on the implications of her behavior for the profession or public perception of it. This is the difference between feeling bad and understanding why what you did was wrong. And it is a distinction that matters enormously. Feeling bad is about you. Understanding why it was wrong is about the people you harmed. It's about the system of trust that makes professional relationships possible. It's about every elderly person who will now be slightly more afraid to let a social worker help them because of what happened here. The panel saw limited insight. Not none. But not enough. Your fourth aha moment. Genuine remorse requires understanding the full weight of what you did, not just the consequences to yourself, but the ripples outward. Without that, remorse is just self-pity wearing empathy's clothing. So what does all of this actually mean for you, watching this right now? Let's be honest. Most of you are not social workers. Most of you will never be in a position where you're accessing a vulnerable person's bank account. So why does any of this matter to you personally? Because the psychological mechanics on display in this case are universal. The rationalization. I'm doing this for them. The selective record-keeping, choosing what to document and what to leave out. The anticipatory impression management, preparing your story before you're caught. The compound effect of small dishonesty growing into something unrecognizable. These are not the mechanics of monsters. They are the mechanics of human beings under pressure, without adequate oversight, in possession of power over someone who can't fight back. And that combination, pressure, unsupervised power, a vulnerable person, exists in families, in workplaces, in care homes, in relationships. Everywhere. The lesson is not, be suspicious of everyone. The lesson is, trust requires verification. Oversight is not an insult to good people, it is a protection for everyone, including the people being trusted. The absence of accountability does not reveal who people truly are. It creates the conditions in which they become someone they never intended to be. Before this case, Safi was a person of good character. People submitted positive testimonials on her behalf. The panel acknowledged her previous good character as a mitigating factor. And yet, that is perhaps the most sobering sentence in this entire story. Not because it makes her less culpable, but because it means none of us can simply point at our own past behavior as proof of our future choices. Character is not a fixed thing. It is a daily practice. It is maintained by accountability, by honesty, by the willingness to say, "This isn't right," before the first line has been crossed, not after the 10th. Here's what I want you to take away from this. The most dangerous assumption you can make about ethics is that you already know where your line is, and that you'll stop before you cross it. You might. Most people do. But the ones who don't rarely saw it coming either. What protects us is not confidence in our own moral character. It is structure. It is oversight. It is transparency. It is the willingness to document, to report, to ask uncomfortable questions before they become unavoidable ones. Safi's case is not a cautionary tale about a bad person. It is a cautionary tale about what happens when a person with ordinary human flaws is placed in a situation with too much access, too little oversight, and too many rationalizations available. Build better systems. Demand better accountability. And never, ever assume that trust without verification is a form of respect. Sometimes it's just negligence wearing a friendly face. If this video made you think, if it disturbed you even a little, or challenged something you believed about human nature, then please hit the like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need to hear these ideas. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it. Every week I break down real cases and real psychology to help you understand the world and the people in it more clearly. Share this with someone who works in a caring profession, or who manages other people. These ideas could matter more than you know. And when you're done here, watch this next video. Because it tackles something even more uncomfortable. You think you already know the answer? I promise you don't.